Hello and welcome to my Nutrient Nirvana channel. Today I'm ridiculously excited to be joined by an absolute legend in the world of dowsing, earth energies and sacred sites, Maria Wheatley. Maria is a second generation dowser who was taught how to decode and divine the land by her late great father and master dowser Dennis Wheatley. She leads sacred sites and dowsing tours all over the UK, Europe and Egypt, and is an accomplished author of many books on these subjects. As some of you may already know, Maria has lectured all over Europe and America and has appeared on the History Channel. And to add to all that, having studied astrology and tarot in the 90s, Maria turned her attention to hypnotherapy, past life regression, and reflexology. Maria teaches certified courses in dowsing tarot, past life regression, and Druidic Soul Star astrology, and all of her information will be linked in the description underneath the video. I've been following Maria's work for a number of years now, and her information and discoveries always resonate very strongly in me. So, welcome Maria to the channel. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very well. Thank you for having me, Paul.
It's an absolute pleasure. As I say, I've been watching you for many years, seen many of your lectures, watched you at Megalithomania, Project Camelot, Kerry Cassidy. So it's a dream come true for me today to have you on the channel.
Oh, thank you.
It's a pleasure. So just so my viewers can get a grasp on the basic things of what you focus on, could you explain what is the geodetic system of Earth energies?
Yes, the geodetic system of Earth energies is really, in a nutshell, the Earth energies of Gaia, of the planet, and they interlace the planet. So if you imagine Earth energies that manifest particular patterns or flow like rivers through the Earth, that's what the geodetic system of Earth energy is. It was discovered in the 1930s by the master dowser Guy Underwood, who looked into places like Stonehenge. He went to Stonehenge 200 times. It was free then with no security, and he really did douse it. And it was John Martineau of Wooden Books that gave these surveys really to my family, and then they were handed down to me, so to speak. So I've really studied the system now for longer than the dowser that originally looked into it, which was Guy Underwood. So really what we're looking at is different ways that the Earth produces energy power points, and the ancients were fully aware of these power places and points in the Earth, and they placed their megalithic sites or pyramids upon them. So that's what they are. They were integrated into ancient sites by the Neolithic and the Bronze Age peoples who were acutely aware. Most of the architecture at different sites corresponds to different types of Earth energy.
Wow. So am I right in saying that that's what the Native American people refer to as the Great Web in the Sky? Is it the same thing?
Very, very similar. If you go to the Aborigines of Australia, they have a particular symbol for deep water and a watering hole as well. And it's the same symbol that the Earth produces that we know from the Earth energy system. So in a way, it's a global language. And when you look to ancient Egypt, how they depicted underground water and surface water alike, it was in the chevron pattern. And that's a universal symbol of water, but it's also how it can flow in the Earth as well. So I think the Earth energies of Gaia is universal. We just have different names for it across the planet, but all ancient cultures recognized it, whether you're at Chaco Canyon in America or Wupaki in America, where I've doused, you have similar Earth energies. It was the people of the past had wisdom, but more importantly, Paul, they were connected to the Earth. We tend to have a little, or some of us tend to have a bit of a disconnect. We're in our houses, we're doing things all the time indoors. And I think to our ancient ancestors, they had a very deep connection with the Earth, and that's what I like to introduce to my dowsing students and my Earth energy work, reconnecting back to Gaia by not just grounding, which is great, kicking your shoes off and standing on the ground. How wondrous is that? But if we kick off our shoes and stand on the ground on a power point, then that is a completely different experience. It's like grounding turned up to number 11.
Wow, I'll have to try that.
Definitely.
What happens when these energies or ley lines cross with each other?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. If you get two lays, that ley lines as they're commonly called, if you get two lays that cross, they produce a mild vortex effect. So if you had a dowsing rod above that locality, then it would cause the dowsing rod to spin. The energy travels too fast along a straight line, so it can be detrimental to some people to live above crossing points, to be on lays. The Chinese feng shui masters were adept at knowing about these energies. They really were. And they documented them in the year 2000 BC. And they said that the energy just goes voomp really fast. So it needs to be slowed down if you live above it. And that's why the ancient Chinese, as I've pointed out time and time again, tend to have those horseshoe roofs, because it slows the chi energy down. And that's what we want. Now, if you're at the crossing point of two earth currents, and imagine that you've got a straight line, a ley line, and then you've got two currents that entwine it, a bit like a DNA strand, a bit like a caduceus symbol, okay? Then the crossing point of the two currents, because one is always male and the other tends to be female, well, you've got a point of balance and harmony and equilibrium. So that's really sought after by the ancient Chinese. And over here at places like Avebury and Stonehenge, they're the sacred points, the crossing points of the earth currents, not necessarily the ley lines. The ley lines are really active. The crossing point of earth currents are a bit more calming, soothing, balancing.
That's fascinating. How could we utilize these areas to benefit humanity when two lines cross, as you've just mentioned? Would there be any way of sort of harnessing that energy for a positive effect for humanity in any way?
Well, yes. I mean, if we see that everything is connected and there is no separation, and we just anchor that into our thoughts for one moment, then any lay that is a global lay becomes a great circle. So it starts off as a line, then encircles the planet. And the ancient Druids of our land, they said there was 12 mighty circles that go around the world. So if we connect to one place, and and lays go everywhere, they just intersect everywhere, then you can send a thought pattern or an energy or some healing to another part of the planet. For instance, at this moment in time, unfortunately, there's a conflict, war in the Ukraine, and people are suffering, and children are suffering. It breaks my heart. And the earth currents that go through Avebury Henge and Uluru in Australia also go through Russia. So if we connect on these earth energy currents, and you can go on to Google, if anybody wants to look at this map, just put in Robert Kuhn earth energies, and you will find the global equivalent rather than the short equivalent, like a place at Avebury. So they're global, and we can send healing through them. But that said, I think any healing thought does not need a ley or an earth current. Just sending out positive energy from your chair in your house is a beautiful thing to do. It would just add something to the earth currents. But prior to doing anything to an earth current or a ley, I communicate that to Gaia's energy system. So if I'm going to send a thought or put somebody on a particular energy point for healing, because there's a lot of healing earth energy patterns, I communicate that to the earth and tell it what I'm going to do. Then you're working in relationship with Gaia, because I feel some people in the West dictate what they want all of the time. So if I go to Avery, I want healing, I want energy. And I think if we turn it around and think, well, we're ask the stones, we're ask the spirit of place, we're communicate to Gaia what we're doing, you instantly have a rapport with the site. The site isn't sort of saying, well, what's she doing here? Why is she taking energy? So I think just a little bit of protocol, as I call it, with working with ancient sites. It's like a hand in a glove then. It's like your great earth mother welcoming you back, with arms outstretched, so to speak.
Wise words. Very nice. Yeah. Let's talk about dowsing. This is one of your areas of expertise. So can you explain what dowsing is to my viewers? Some might not know. And how has it helped you gain a better understanding of perhaps why a sacred site was erected in the first place and what its purpose
Yes.
was?
Yes, that's the $1,000,000 question.
Mhm.
What the purpose
Put you on
was.
the spot. Sorry about that.
No, not at all. And theories abound, you know. But if we go back to the first question, what is dowsing? Well, dowsing traditionally is associated with water divining, finding something that is an invisible thing beneath the ground. Now, that could be water. And Cleopatra, for example, the beautiful Cleopatra of ancient Egypt fame, she employed people to find gold. Uri Geller was very good at finding oil, for example. So dowsing is finding what you can't see. It's making a dowsing target. I specialize in dowsing for earth energies and different types of earth energies and different types of lays. But you could douse for anything in theory. You could, you know, find, I mean, I found underground water pipes for a builder, not the most exciting of one of my jobs back in the day, but we all start somewhere. And so you can find literally what your mind wants to focus on. So dowsing is just that. And you can have pendulum dowsing for remedies. Just what it's very, very broad subject. And so I feel, you know, that our ancient ancestors maybe had a more innate connection with the earth energies. They may not have needed dowsing, although a very famous dowser did say that in a cave painting dating back to 6000 BC, there was a dowsing lesson depicted in a cave painting in Africa. So maybe they did douse on that level. I think they certainly connected to these energy patterns. So let's say, for example, at most ancient sites you have a spiral pattern called a geospiral. It's the harmonic surface pattern of very, very deep water that is born within the earth, independent of rainfall, meaning that water is generated by the planet. Planets can generate water. I'm sure geologists would argue against that, but I would safely predict you will find water on Mars in the planet just as much as on the what used to be on the surface. Planets can generate all sorts of things: gold, sulfur, plutonium. I mean, the list goes on. Why not water? And this very deep water generates a spiral pattern, which is very healing to be above. So that was always integrated into ancient sites. So one aspect of an ancient site is for healing, soothing, calming energy. And anybody that's hung out at Avebury for more than sort of 10 minutes in one place, especially at the centers of the northern and southern inner circles, feels that benefit. They feel chilled out. There's something changes within them, and that's the earth energy being emitted below the ground and interacting with them.
Something that's always fascinated me about a lot of these sacred sites, like Stonehenge and Avebury, is they always tend to have an embankment around them.
Yes.
Do you know why that is at all?
Yes, that's called a henge. And a henge is normally a ditch on the inside and a bank on the outside. And because we're in chalk downland, around Stonehenge and Avebury, they would have appeared chalk white. Okay, brilliant white and polished off in places, especially around the entrances. But we see them today as being quite undulating, but they were quite contemporary looking. They had a big V as the entrance, the causeway through them. They separate the sacred from the profane outer regions, but they're also on an energy pattern that is quite often circular in shape, that was discovered by master dowsers in the 1930s. But Stonehenge is different. Today, you don't see its bank. If you go down the A303 and you drive, you can look over and you can see Stonehenge. Yay, there's the stones. But in the Neolithic and the Bronze Age, we must envision round Stonehenge, a henge bank 10 feet tall. The only thing you would see is the greater Trilithon's top capstone poking over the top. So it was a very secretive place. That the henge at Stonehenge made it very, very secretive, but it got ploughed out over the years. And it, got dismantled as well to some regard, and became much more ruinous. So when people look at Stonehenge, they're seeing basically the remnants of that which was. Do you see what I mean? And they forget about the henge bank. But if we envision a 10-foot, 6-foot to 10-foot bank right around Stonehenge, the sound acoustics now change completely. Do you see what I mean? The experience changes completely. Stonehenge to some feels quite claustrophobic in the open air.
The irony,
Now put that bank around it where you can't see out. It will change your sensory perception. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And you've got some very strong vortex energy at Stonehenge, which can, make people feel boom. They're going up really high, really fast. Avebury is more soft and gentle with her energies. Stonehenge is a power place.
So there goes my theory. I actually always thought to myself that these banks had some sort of connection maybe to water. I know you often see Silbury Hill like surrounded by water when it's rained a lot, and I wondered, maybe I'd heard a theory once, I think, where somebody suggested that the stone circle in Avebury was connected to a river that's not too far away from Avebury now, that somehow has been blocked off or whatever.
No, that's incorrect. The two river, the Avebury is associated to a river. The original Beckhampton Avenue crossed the river Winterbourne. Now it's called Winterbourne because it's only surface water in the winter. But I use the Wessex Water borehole depths given to me by Wessex Water, and Thames Water as well back in the day. And I used their boring bits to see, if you had more water in the Neolithic, which you did, could that fill up with water, the Avebury moat, so to speak? And yes, it could at certain times of the year, probably when the water table fluctuates. In the summer it will drop, and in the winter with more rain, well, guess what, it rises. So with those fluctuating water table levels, then I am sure that part of that moat would have been full of water, but the water would have looked kind of chalky white like mother's milk. It wouldn't have looked pure water because of the chalk. Do you see what I mean? Interacting with the chalk. So going through to Avebury, it would have been like going onto an island effect. Now we get this in Egypt as well, at the Osirian that's behind Abydos. That's an island temple as well, a bit like Silbury Hill, and you have to go through on a causeway. So using Wessex Water, I predicted that it could be filled with water at particular times of the year. Now, if you go to the name Avebury and you go to a Basque and an Old Gaelic kind of version that sounds quite close to Avebury, Avebury. Yeah, it's not exactly Avebury because a bury is more Saxon, meaning fortification. But if we go back a little way, that means magical new waters. So if those waters were rising, they would seem like they were magical waters coming back up, maybe coinciding with the spring equinox when the lambs and the ewes rather come into milk for their lambs. It could have been all around Imbolc, the spring equinox, February the 1st, March the 21st. So yes, I think that is correct, but more to do with the underground water table than any river. There was no river connected to Avebury.
Right, okay. So the builders of these circles, did they deliberately try to incorporate water for some sort of function at all, do you think?
Oh, yes. I mean, water's always been considered, the water of life, and it's involved in numerous different types of ritual over the years. And what's been noticed, if on just a little way from Avebury, you have the Downs, and that's where the Sarsens for Avebury came from. And you have on private ground, unfortunately, you have a stone called the Templar's Bath. It's a Neolithic stone. It was used by the Knights Templar, but at a much later date. Okay, and it's smoothed out. And it has like a sink area, and it has, for want of a better description, a plug hole that is being drilled through 2 feet of solid Sarsen stone, a pentagram. Okay, and that was where the water flowed out of. Now, what the ancients used to do, they used to put their most sacred water above the earth energy patterns that symbolize water to sort of make it quite sacred. They're called stoop stones, or basin stones, for example. So yes, they would have been charging up water, so to speak, and taking them to these places. Now, originally, it was archaeologist David Fields suggested that in one part of Avebury at one time there was a spring by the henge, and just outside of the henge. It's dried up now and no longer in existence. So that could have been a source of water. And it probably, springs are deemed sacred. They magically come up out of the ground and bubble and babble. So I would imagine that would have been quite sacred at Avebury in the Neolithic.
So getting back to Avebury, Maria, we have a sacred site where 2 ley lines meet. We've got the St Michael and the St Mary lines. We have column-shaped male stones, as I understand it, and we have diamond-shaped female stones. And I remember speaking to Brian Sumbler, who used to manage the Avebury Antique Shop. I don't know if you ever came across Brian at all.
Yeah, I knew Brian. The late Brian. He's no longer with us.
Yeah, I know. So.
But yes, I knew Brian quite well. He supported me back in the day. Lovely chap.
Yeah, he was very nice, man. I once saw him running across the circle, chasing after his dog. Anyway, so getting back to what we were talking about. So he told me that Avebury was a fertility circle. That's what it was built for, if I remember rightly. So do you concur with that at all? And do you know why the Avebury circle was built in the first place and for what purpose?
Well, I've got some ideas. One, the Mary and Michael are not lines. Hamish Miller called them lines in his book, The Sun and the Serpent, but they're earth currents that entwine the St. Michael ley. So they're actually rivers of energy. They're not lines, okay? A lot of people make that mistake, so you're not on your own with that one. Hamish wrote that book on the road. And so that he wanted it published at the end. And also it's like, if you find them as lines, well, we're not a very good dowser then as well. So it's a good bit of a test by Hamish as well. So you do have the male and female meandering earth currents there. And it was actually the first person ever to call the diamond stones feminine and the column stones masculine was actually 2 archaeologists. That was Alexander Keeler and Professor Stuart Piggott. And they said it was a fertility center, and other people copied that. But I think ancient sites are multifaceted. They're like a diamond. They're not just one thing, because Avebury incorporates the oldest Neolithic calendar in the area, because it's the oldest stone will cast a shadow, as discovered by Professor Terence Meaden, onto particular stones at the 8-fold year. Yeah, which are the equinoxes and the solstices and the days in between those as well, like Beltane and Lammas. So it's a calendar as well. It's above healing area, so it's a healing center as well. It's also a place where people came to pilgrimage as well and came to those areas. It's also an astronomical temple, because I discovered I was the first person ever in the world, I'm quite proud of that one, to have captured on camera the moon's Platonic cycle, the moon's most northerly moonrise in the Temple of the Moon, the northern inner circle. And also another alignment I discovered alongside my co-author on my first book about Avebury was the fact that if you're sat in the devil's chair, and that's a massive megalith with a ledge on, that is one of the entrance stones, you would have seen the midwinter sunrise from that point, but the henge bank got extended 200 years ago, taken back to its original position. You'd have seen the midwinter sunrise sat in that chair. It would have been like sitting in a megalithic throne. I always feel like a megalithic queen when I'm sat in it. So to say it's just about fertility, to say it's about one thing, I don't think it is. Also, at these times of the year, the later Druids of the Iron Age said that's a time when the veil grows thin between this world and the next world. So it could have been a place for divination. For instance, like an oracle center of Delphi. It could have been, attracting people from all over the known world. We know that was happening at Stonehenge because you've got beads from Egypt, you've got jet from Estonia there. You have lots of different artifacts there. So I think the same was occurring at Avebury. So I would say it could be a healing temple. It's an astronomical temple. And when we have the lays, the St. Michael lay, originally aligned to the Beltane, the May the 1st sunrise, and the Samhain, the Halloween sunset. And at those times of the year, the whole center, the whole lay is activated with solar power, many believe. So that's a time when people could have, I would have thought Avebury would have been well used at Beltane because it's on the Beltane lay. So they're multifaceted. I don't think they're just one thing.
I would go along with that, definitely. How about the dating of Avebury? I think it's officially dated back to, is it about 4000 BC, the Neolithic period? But you've got other ancient sites like the pyramids at Giza, for example, that many people now believe were constructed a long time before then, possibly 10,000 BC. Do you think that the both sites are developed around the same time, or do you go along with the official dating of Avebury?
Avebury's a composite site, same as Stonehenge, and that means you've got different dates. It wasn't all built at the same time. The first phase of Avebury was the largest stones set in the middle, and everything else came later. Okay, so you've got different time zones spanning 1,000 years. Now, if we go to Stonehenge, where you've had a lot of excavations, you've got very few excavations at Avebury, really, and you go to one which was some grain and some charcoal found by a bluestone pit, a socket hole, then and that was dated to 8000 BC. But the archaeological idea is you choose the younger date. Now, the ice cap didn't come down as far as Stonehenge. So even in 10,000 BC, we were ice free, so to speak. I really do feel the sites are a lot older. A colleague of mine, a good friend, actually, John Cowie, he wrote a book about Silbury Hill being, in his understanding, a pyramid. Okay, that's how his take was. But he went into Silbury, as did I, when they opened it up and you could go through the old tunnel. Okay, it was a great privilege. John decided out of his own money and pocket to take a sample that he was allowed to take, carbon dated. Now, the archaeologist Jim Leary did the same. Now, Jim Leary's date came out 2480 BC. If you want to be pernickety with numbers, that's what date they had. But John Cowie's date was 12,000 BC.
Wow.
So, maybe we should be more open-minded and why is it everything in the ancient world was built in 2500 BC? You don't have to be a historian. You just have to remember 2500 BC, the pyramids, Avebury, Stonehenge. I don't think it's that simple. I think it has a complex dating around it, and some are added later without a shadow of a doubt, because you get particular types of beaker pottery. So you do it, it's a mix, it's a composite monument and not at one date, but I think they started thousands of years before we are led to believe.
So do you have any personal thoughts on how they erected the stones at Avebury?
Well, what it seems to be round the stone, because they're not in the earth. I mean, a lot of people think stones are in the earth. They're not. They're in chalk sockets, big chalk sockets. Okay.
Yeah.
So they're not in the earth. Now, if they were in the earth, you'd have what's called packing stones around them, and they're not. And what you see when you have a socket hole at Stonehenge and at Avebury, smaller socket holes around it, which is in all probability wedges that you would start to wedge that stone up. A lot of people don't like that idea because they want something a lot more fantastical. But that's the evidence there. That said, how you get a 10-ton lintel on top of that at Stonehenge is different. And Avebury has the heaviest megalith in Great Britain, and that's over 100 tons of the cove stone of the central feature of the northern inner circle. So how you got that up with a wood, I don't know, but on the smaller stones, that's what you can do. It's $1 million question. You know, you've had ideas since the 60s through levitation and sound. Sounds very fashionable at the moment, and prior to that it was the lays. You know, you put that on the lay. Nobody really knows, and its theories just abound, you know, from ancient aliens, the Nephilim, to and I think they were actually humans, you know, that were contemporary. We tend to project everything outside of ourselves, I feel, as a culture. But there were definitely burials at the bottom of some of the pits at Stonehenge, cremation burials, and the majority actually were women in phase one of Stonehenge. So we know that they were associated at some point to some kind of offerings. And then at Avebury you have some ritual burials. Some people were deliberately placed along the avenue where you walked in the ground in graves. What was all that about? You know, it's I love prehistory, Paul, because you can say anything you like about it. You can come out with any theory.
The risk of sounding the risk of sounding a bit trippy. I remember a solstice I spent at Avebury, and I walked through the procession of stones, the avenue, isn't it? And I had the strangest feeling that I was walking over people. And I swear I did not know anything about the ritual burial.
Hardly anybody does. And I tell you why hardly anybody knows about the ritual burials at Avebury, I beg your pardon, is because Alexander Keeler, who bought the land up and re-erected the avenue was all flattened down. All of that's being re-erected and set in concrete. He restored that part in the 30s and on to the 40s in part. And he wanted it to be a big tourist centre. And that was his dream, for people to visit his beautiful construction. So start talking about ritual killings and strange things doesn't bode that well. Okay, so that was written out of the early guides.
Very interesting, very interesting. Somebody that I've had on the channel before, Ralph Ellis, I think you know Ralph, he suggested that the Avebury stone circle seen from above is a representation of the Earth floating in space. Would you go along with that one?
I like that idea, but it's like I say, you know, it took 1,000 years to build. It was built by two different cultures. Now, unless they had the identical plan, then I would be quite skeptical about that, because, you know, you've got 1,000 years from the start to the end. And also Avebury it's got missing features. that people don't necessarily add into that model. And it's got 2 more avenues that haven't been added in. When William Stukeley drew that in 1724, which is what most people copy from, because he wanted it to be a serpent temple and he revived Druidry, I leave those out. I leave those features out. It doesn't fit in with my beautiful serpent temple. So that was made out. Now start adding different things in, like the timber temples. Yeah, it had timber structures within it as well. It had extra stones. Then it changes. It's not that neat of just being the 2 circles, representing the northern and the southern hemisphere. I like the idea, but I don't think that's what the ancient ancestors were doing at Avebury. I think they were concerned with their own sections within their own communities, because a lot of people suffered around Avebury. If you look to the evidence from the round barrows, that's why I think part of it was used as a healing temple. And like I discovered in the Neolithic era, surrounding Stonehenge and Avebury, the people were very short. I've measured all the femur bones of the Neolithic, and other people have, antiquarians, anthropologists rather, excuse me, they measured the femur bones. The one guy from Dorset, for example, he was only 4'9", and they were very small with long skulls. Then the Beaker people came here from the DNA now suggests more like the Netherlands. They were very tall people as well. Coulter described them as tall, stout people, and the femur bones measured from them do put them to be quite tall. So this is what I mean. You've got 2 different cultures, and I think those 2 different cultures, 1,000 years apart, and that's like you and me identifying with King Alfred in King Alfred in the 9th century. There's such a big gap in that time. I think that when the Neolithic worship there wasn't a stone circle. There was just the large stones. It was the Bronze Age people that added to that monument. And then 400 years later, we'll put an avenue on. And then we'll put a stone circle just one, then we'll do a timber. So I think the model that's used for that isn't Avebury in its totality. Sorry.
No, that's very interesting. Thanks for that. That's made me look at it in a whole different light. That's fantastic. Before we leave Avebury, I have to ask you this because I've had a few weird and wonderful experiences at Avebury. On many occasions, I've seen many different things. I've seen orbs. I've seen military planes with other vehicles above the military planes on the same flight path, kind of following each other. I've seen a helicopter attacked by a big golden orb. I've seen a lot more that I won't go into now, but it's a very, very strange place in that respect. So have you ever experienced anything slightly out of the ordinary at Avebury at all?
Oh yes, I'll say that in a moment. I mean, we are on the edge of the Salisbury Plain, Area 51. You can't go in there without special permission, and of late it's on high alert. There's all red flags around the Salisbury Plain because of the Ukraine, I would imagine. And a lot of people have seen craft escorted, not being chased, escorting a very classic saucer-shaped spaceship heading towards the Salisbury Plain. And so it is a low-fly zone here. The military have a low-fly zone over Avebury Henge. They can't over Stonehenge because if you get more than 500 tourists, you have to be above 500 feet. In case you crash. But I've had many an experience at Avebury. One that was a collective experience witnessed by a lot of people was the stones emitting sound. Now we were on the edge of a thunderstorm, and I was waiting for a group of teenagers with some adult leaders, and they were running late from Oxford, and it was a rattling thunderstorm going around the Kennet Valley, because Avebury's in a valley called the Kennet Valley, and I'd lost the will to try and look half decent because the rain was coming down here. I talk about being bedraggled. And so anyway, they came across running towards me when they did arrive, very excitable, saying, come into this sector, the stones are singing. And so I ran, and I don't do running that often. I ran over to the stones, and they were emitting this really eerie sound. Intuitively, but without discussing it amongst ourselves, nobody touched the stones. So I've heard them release sound. I've seen and heard a lot of voices at Avebury, one of which guided myself and my co-author, my friend Busty, to discover the solar alignment I was telling you about. It was the ancestors guided us to go there by telling us down the avenue, what do you think you're doing? And when they said that, what do you think you're doing? I suddenly thought, yeah, I'm in the wrong sector. I need to be, for some reason, I need to be over there, and lots of other different experiences as well. But my one was, I liked listening to the stones making that sound with children, because it really got those children to
I can imagine
the ancient world. And one of them now got inspiration from me to be, this was a long time ago, he was 15 at the time, he's now a top architect looking into earth energies and is into the paranormal, and so I'm really proud, you know, of influence. I love taking children and teenagers around ancient sites, because for me the future is in them.
That's fascinating. I don't suppose you could do an impersonation of the sound that the stones made, could you at all?
It was like a low sort of like,
That's how I imagined it, yeah.
And it was like a bit of a warping noise as well. That said, you know, I don't live that far from Avebury. I live in a market town called Marlborough. That's about sort of, I don't know, 6-7 miles away. And each time there's been a thunderstorm, believe me, I've hot-footed it. Yeah, to try and recapture that with a video with my phone, because I didn't have we didn't have so much phones, you know, back in the day. That's because that was about 15 years ago. It might even be more now, actually. So, and I've got people that I know that own the shop. I've told them, I've told locals, and it was a very rare event. But I do put it down to the atmospherics, because it was a thunderstorm.
Yeah, it couldn't be a coincidence. I think I've read somewhere that the ancient people were able to hear the stones. I've read that somewhere. So
I've said that for many, many years. I've said that because when I did some tests on the stones to try and prove or disprove that the stones have these energy points that I liken to chakras, and I have done for nearly 15, 20 years, Rodney Hale, who worked with Paul Devereux, he's a famous Earth Mysteries chap. You probably have heard of him.
I don't know.
And so I invited him to Avebury to look at different things other than what he'd done with Paul Devereux and his Dragon Project team. And we measured where I could get these dowsing reactions from a standing stone, and he put his equipment on there, and others have done that since, David Webb, and we got, you know, 18 hertz. And it's just beyond, sorry, it wasn't, it was 17 16 hertz, and so that's just out of our hearing range. But the people that built it, the first culture, had long skulls. Now, could it be, and they had their ears in a different place, they didn't look like us, okay? And that's what I'm bringing out in my next book, how these people looked, because now I've got the whole body measurements. It's been a long journey to get that from places like Oxford, believe me. And I think because of the ear displacement and because of their longer skulls, they could probably hear that hertz frequency, which is just beyond. We hear it 20 hertz, roughly speaking, and they were just lower down than that. So yes, I think they had an audible experience of ancient sites. Ours is visual.
Yeah, that makes complete sense now. That's very, very interesting. I was actually just going to ask you about your discoveries at Stonehenge, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that you discovered the elongated skull people through dowsing. Is that correct?
Yes, because it was a strange story, but isn't life strange? Sometimes it's fact is more weird than fiction. But somebody had reported me to the taxman that I had loads of earnings. I mean, I wish, yeah. But anyway, and so I was in an audit, and I would never want anyone to go through an audit. It's not a nice experience, and you feel guilty. I was starting to feel guilty, even though my accountant did my books. I don't do them. I'm not mathematically minded, believe me. And so a friend said to me, Maria, you're heading for, a nervous breakdown. You've got to distract yourself away from this. So I got this really big map in my house of the Stonehenge environs and decided I would do what dowsers don't normally do. I changed the way you dowse. Instead of asking to be shown something, which dowsers do, show me where this is, show me where that is. It's called the show me technique. I decided to ask the land, you tell me where to go, a sort of thing. And I use what's called the 2-point fix. It's where you get one line and another, and X marks the spot. And it was this massive long barrow. So I thought, wow, I'll go and visit it. It was right on the edge of the Salisbury Plain. Sometimes it's in the red flag zone and you can't go there, and sometimes you can. It was on the day when I could. So I thought, I've got to find out. I led on there, did a meditation, and thought, I've got to find out who's in this massive, biggest long barrow in Northwest Europe. And normally they're communal. You get a lot of people into long barrows. And this one's primary burial was for a woman. And who hears about the prehistoric women? You hear about the Amesbury archer, the Boscombe bowman, the Stonehenge shaman, but not necessarily the females. And so I decided to track her down to a university, and then when I photographed her, I realized that she had a long skull, a very long skull, and then that led me to do research in the area, and then I discovered most of the people in long barrows had long skulls, whereas the much later beaker, taller people had round skulls, and they were put in round barrows. So the barrows that they were interned in reflect their skull shape as well.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's amazing. Reminded me actually of the Avebury long barrow, because I always suspected that because when you walk into the long barrow at Avebury, you get into it a certain distance and then it kind of stops. But from the outside, it continues for a lot further, doesn't it? So I kind of, conspiracy theorist or whatever, thought, what are they hiding by doing that? But do you think it was originally constructed?
Yeah,
With half of it just there for some reason, but not accessible.
Absolutely, all long barrows of the Cotswold 7 type. You're looking at a Cotswold 7 trapezoid monument that was terribly restored by Richard Atkinson and Professor Piggott. They made the entrance much higher. Okay, because of health and safety, you'll bang your head. Well, in a pub it says mind the step, but anyway, so you would be bowing to sacred space when you entered it originally. All long barrows, you tend to dip down, then go in, then come back up. Do you see what I mean? So there's that to it. But yes, they were built into 2 sections. I've got an idea why, because it was an Avebury author called Steve. Oh, what's his second name? Oh gosh,
I think I know who you're talking
Marshall.
about.
Steve Marshall, and he did some sound experiments. And I happened to be with him. I'm a friend with him. I've been around. I predicted his marriage through my Druid Soul Star.
Wow.
So anyway, so I'm up there with them, and he gets a bull roarer and a Neolithic woo 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 kind of instrument, if you will, and through his understanding, then one of the stones in the barrow starts to change at twilight, if you're a little bit over, to a black hole, woo woo woo, like that.
Sorry to interrupt, Maria, but I think I've heard either this story before or something very similar, and he said that he got his teenage son, I think it was, to go into the barrow and do some drumming. And he did some drumming for about 45 minutes. And then he came out and Steve said to him, what happened? What did you see? And his teenage son was a bit like, well, I saw you. You came in after about 10 minutes. And then after that, I started seeing this black hole, this black circle get bigger and bigger and bigger. But apart from that, nothing. The way he tells it is quite funny. But
I know he's a very funny funny chap, and sadly he's got Parkinson's.
Oh, sorry to hear that. Yeah, my dad had that. Yeah.
I know it's such a sadness. What can you say? But a big shout. But nonetheless, what I think is going on in some regard is, in Druidry, you have this, and going back to the Iron Age, this mergence with the land. You merge with it, yeah. So a ritual burial might be about a merging with the land, becoming its guardian. Yeah. So with the West Kennet long barrow, I think when you through sound, the black hole opens up, for want of a better description. Then maybe with astral projection, with some type of spiritual tool and technique, you would enter the barrow. And you could travel through that barrow to maybe when the veil is thin, for example, but you're confined in that barrow and you're safe, from the other astral entities that may be around. So I think it was part of a ritual initiation. And it was going on from Steve's work to Reading University duo, David Keaton and Aaron Watson, for example. They and Paul Devereux as well, to give him a shout. They said it was down to the male voice as well, in particular long barrows. But I think the most spectacular acoustics, and that's great, West Kennet. I love it. It's on my stomping ground. But Campster round and Campster long, heading up north to the Scottish area. You've got two barrows. They're some distance apart, 2 to 3 meters, 100 meters rather apart. Now, if you were in Campster round and you're drumming, like you just talked about drumming in a barrow, and you're now a long distance away, you go outside of Campster round, can't hear anyone drumming. Go in, obviously you hear someone drumming. But from the ground surface of Campster Long, it's like a rumble thunder, and the sound comes up from the floor from that. So that's to me, that's one of the most amazing long barrow. And that was, again, the Reading duo, Reading University, using pink noise to record these things, discovered that, which must have been a wonder. And it still is now. I think if I heard that in the barrow, I think
definitely
a wonder.
Wow. Yeah, and I think did the long barrows have some sort of ancestral significance?
That's one theory, that because in the Neolithic you wouldn't be necessarily put in hole all of the time. Or there was one male hole at West Kennet. Again, they had long skulls, quite short. One was quite tall at 5'10", but that in that era that was tall. And the femur bones, like I say, have been measured. And so the ancestral rites, it's believed, because one of the skulls at West Kennet was found within the ditch embankment area of Windmill Hill Causeway enclosure, which is about 1.5 miles away, and is contemporary to West Kennet long barrow, because again the stone circles weren't in existence. There were standing stones at Avebury, but if you're in the Neolithic era, there was no standing circles. There was no circles there, no avenues, just these scattering of stones in a timber temple there. And so, yes, they think it was ancestral rites, but that's an idea. That's not to say that is actually what was going on. And by the time it came to the Bronze Age, if you were a woman, for example, you were more than likely to be cremated rather than interned into a long barrow. That's the body, going in. And their bones were definitely being carried around the landscape, because you have the pollen on some of the bones were analysed, and the death rites. So you were moving bones around in an ancestral there, or were women seen to be magical into divination? Were they used as part of something else? And in Dorset, they had dead in a kind of death hut, and like you get puppets and their arms can go like this. They put little jet rings around these bones and kept teenagers out of the ground in this area for 500 years.
Whoa.
So, I mean, when we look at our death rites, that would be, I couldn't have that. I couldn't have my child in a hut out there and doing things. So what were they doing? Death meant a different thing to them. Yeah, we're trying to project our own cultural identity onto these ancient sites, and I sometimes really don't think that's the case, because a lot of people don't talk about the death rites. They just look at stones. But when you start looking at death rites and the people, a whole new chapter emerges from times past.
Maria, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with me today. I feel like I've learned so much, and I'll probably go back and watch this about 8 times just to try and make sure I've not missed anything that you've said. It's been fascinating. I've been into megaliths since I was a kid, and I've been to Avebury, I've been to Stonehenge, and I just love the magic of the places. And I've followed you for a number of years, as I've said. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom today. Where can my viewers find out more about you? Maybe find out more information on what you offer?
Yes, I mean, please do. My kind of touring website is the Avebury experience.co.uk, and I'll be having my own conference there, Mysterious Universe at Avebury, on September the 3rd and 4th, with the Archdruid speaking. I've got sacred geometry. So yeah, so you know, give that a shout, as they say.
Yes,
and my teaching platform is esotericcollege.com, which is fully affiliated to the Association of Distant Learning Colleges, so I can give courses to diploma standard, and I'm a professionally trained tutor. I used to tutor back in the day for New College in Swindon, and I've written diploma courses for other colleges as well as my own. So it's the esotericcollege.com or the Avebury Experience. And my conference details will be on my website. It's going to be quite different. It's going to be interactive on the second day, where everybody comes out and listens not just to my version of Avebury, but the Druid version, sacred geometry version, and it will culminate with shamanic drumming at the West Kennet Long Barrow. So there's lots of events going on, because just like we've been discussing giants and short people, there's more than one story to be told. And that's why I want to gather all of these experts together and say, let's listen to them all and embrace the different stories and people that tell them.
Fantastic. I'll link that all underneath the video. We never got round to talking about tarot, past life regression, your work with Dolores Cannon. So I'd love to have you back on to discuss that if possible.
Yeah, definitely. It's just such a privilege looking back, Paul, working with Dolores. You know, I look back and I pinch myself.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear all about that in the future. So thanks, Maria. Thanks for everyone. Please like, share and subscribe if you've enjoyed this, and we'll see you again. Thanks very much. Cheers.